Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are on chapter 36, verse 7. We left off yesterday with the question of the Orach Chaim. The Torah describes that the donations were enough and more. And so the Orach Chaim is just bothered by the duality of that language. It's actually, besides being redundant, it actually feels even a little bit contradictory. So he wonders what's going on with that. So in mine, it's a paragraph into the Orach Chaim. It's about 8 lines into the Orach Chaim on Pasuk Zayin. Maybe this is the Torah's way of showing us the affection God has for the Jewish people. Like imagine this moment. In our times, I think it's more theoretical than anything, but a person hears an appeal and they're really, really inspired, and they go and they look at their accounts to figure out and they finally they shift money around, they rebudget things, and they figure, I can afford a donation to this cause, and they drop everything and they call the organization. The organization says, thanks, we raised what we need already. It was very thoughtful of you, but we don't need it anymore. So it's a little bit of a deflating feeling. So imagine this was such a big deal. Don't worry, by the way, I don't know the last time that happened. So people should, but it was such a big deal. So imagine the person who comes, who they say, go back home. We don't need it. What a terrible feeling. So God didn't want that to happen. V'zeh shir ha'kasav. So this is what the pasuk is saying. V'amlacha she'tziva Hashem la'asos b'mishkan, hispika likanes b'socha kol ha'mlacha she'asu b'nei Yisrael gam she'oser perish she'yosu me'atzarach hifsik ha'makabel l'kabel hispik ha'makabel l'kabel yosem b'shiuro al yedei nes. Basically, God made a miracle, and that even this is what the Orach Chaim is suggesting, that even though more was donated than was necessary, it somehow ended up being enough. In other words, on paper, there was too much, but in the end of the day, everything had a place within the building. So that's the pshat, that really was more than was necessary, but God miraculously made it that they needed more gold than they should have needed, whatever it is. And so it ended up being sufficient, but it should have been more than needed because God wanted it to be that everyone's donation would make a difference. Oh, al zeh derech, v'amalacha she'ivio ha'sadayim lo chaser v'lo yoser hagam shoyse yoser k'fi ha'emes v'omer v'hoser ki nasa nes v'lo hoser. The second point he's saying, it seems to be very similar. I'm not even sure what his subtlety is, but okay. But that's just an interesting Orach Chaim to think about. Okay, let's go on now to verse 8. Vayasu kol chacham leiv ba'osei hamlacha es hamishkan es ha'yirios. So all of the wise-hearted people among those who did the work created these 10 curtains. Sheish Masar describes all the materials, and now it starts going into what they actually did. The last pasuk had ended off with talking about the donations, and now we boil it down to what they actually did. Now, probably the most compelling question, this is a double parsha this week, Vayakheil-Pekudei, probably the most compelling question, which perhaps has not occurred to you in our reading the psukim, because we're just seeing a pasuk here and a pasuk there, but if it surely will occur to you on Shabbos when you hear the parsha, why do we have to go through all of this again and again and again? God says you should do it. Moshe tells the Bnei Israel to do it. Now this pasuk says, you know what? They did it. In other words, it goes into great detail as to what they did. Guess what? They did exactly what they were told to do. What do you need all of this for? So if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Ches, Vayasu kol chacham leiv b'osei hamlachas hamishkan es ha'yirios. Hinei hichzir b'Torah melechas hamishkan chamesh pa'amim. The Torah goes through this discussion of the work of the Mishkan 5 times. Ki hiskiras kula b'tzava b'efrat b'chlal. First of all, it goes through the instructions, both broadly and specifically. Tchila amar v'asisa kach. So first of all, God says to Moshe, do this, do this. V'achrekein hisker kulam b'derech klal. V'yasu eis kol asher tzivisicha es o moed. V'yasarom leidus ad kol asher tzivisicha yasu. So God has broad instructions, in broad psukim instructing that it be done, and more specific psukim instructing that it be done. V'atam b'zeh, the reason for this, shetziva Hashem l'Moshe sheyagid el b'tzalel v'oliyav l'chol hachachamim hamlacha b'chlala achrei kein yikrevu elei la'asosa k'lo yichsharu l'mlechas hakodesh ad sheyishmu kol hamlacha v'yavinu osa v'kablu aleim sheyedu la'ashlima. It's a very interesting, just practical pshat the Ramban is saying. Ramban is saying that God is telling Moshe it's not enough to tell every craftsperson what their job is. That's not good enough. Everybody involved in the project has to understand the broad goals. Sort of like everyone has to get like the bird's eye view, so to say, of what's supposed to be happening here. Once they understand the forest, once everyone understands the forest, everyone involved with the work needs to understand the forest, then you could go up to specific people and instruct them to work on their various trees. So, but he says, lacking that concept of getting the big picture, people aren't going to do a good job. It's a very interesting thing to think about, and I would guess that that's worthwhile advice even in our things today. B'shas hamasa hizkiros hatzchila b'derech haklal haniskar v'yomer yavo v'yasu es kol asher tzivu Hashem es hamishkan hasolo v'yechzar mikan prat echad ki b'varei hutzrach Moshe leimor lachachamim ha'osim hamlacha asu hamishkan ha'sirios orech ha'iriyah kach v'rochav kach v'chein b'chol hamlacha v'los k'yar kasav hazeh ki b'yadua she'amar lem hakol keseder achrei she'asu kein kol davar v'davar. So it's interesting. When God gives Moshe the instructions, there's a broad instruction and a very specific instruction. Then when Moshe relays it to the craftspeople, it's just broad and it's not specific. Ramban says, because it's understood. Of course, Moshe gave them the specific instructions as well. That's obvious. V'atam bozeh, kilo hutzrach Moshe lifrot lahem kol hamasa davar v'davar kasher huskar b'tzavav b'maseh aval katzru lahem Kilu Amar Shiyasu Mishkan B'Esirios Chamesh Keneged Chamesh V'Heim Evinu Kiyasu Lulos Makbilos Karse Azav Giyotz B'Zeh B'Chol Amlacha B'Katzra Rimeis Lahem Ha'inyan V'Heim Evinu Hakol Okein Lo Herich B'Frat Hazeh Yirmos HaKasov Chachmasam Uvinasam V'Tov HaSeichel Shabahem. So the Ramban though suggests something different. The Ramban says, I mean, this is really, if somebody who wasn't the Ramban would suggest this, he would tell me he doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's the Ramban, so we say that we have what to learn from the Ramban. And the Ramban says Moshe didn't have to tell him, didn't tell them the details of how it should be done. Moshe understood the details. Moshe gave them the broad sense of what they were supposed to do. But in terms of how many curtains or where the curtains would match up with each other, he didn't have to tell them. They intuitively got it, which speaks to this idea, says the Ramban, that God imbued them with the wisdom for how to do this. Now, it's not only did God, this is what we spoke about earlier in the week already, not only did God imbue them with these abilities that they didn't even know that they had, but God even gave them the wisdom to understand how it's all supposed to come together. And that only reinforces that this is just a spiritually charged task that they're doing. V'acharkein hichzer amlacha kula b'derech haprada rishon vayas kol chacham lev bosei amlachas hamishkan vayasu yirios izim vayas sakrashim vayamas b'chol inin sheyomar vayomer Moshe kol das b'yisrael kol amlacha shetzivu Hashem oso v'yomar vayasu b'yisrael kol asher tzivu Hashem es Moshe kein osu. So basically, the Ramban says, look, we have God's instructions to Moshe. We have the fact that Moshe instructed Jewish people broadly as to what they were supposed to do. But now when it does it, all of a sudden the Torah gets back to the specifics. They did this, and they did this, and they did this, and they did this. And this is the real obvious question. Why in the world did it have to say all of those? Why can't it just be that They did everything Moshe told them to do. Just one pasuk. Avoratza lomar ki Moshe hiskira kol hadas bnei Yisrael v'achachamim sham kol hamlacha bichlal. Moshe mentioned the tasks generally. Kiniskavin bazeh sheyisnadvu ha'am k'dei avoda l'hamlacha gedola. Moshe wanted, as we mentioned earlier in the week, Moshe wanted the donors to understand the magnitude of what needed to be done, and that would motivate them to give a lot. And that the craftspeople should understand the scope of what we're talking about here. Vayakheil-Pekudei hiskir befrad hamasa lahagid she'asu kol hachachamim b'mishkan v'zeu she'amar v'yasu kol chacham leibosei hamlacha es hamishkan es hiri.
Pretty cold out. He must be frozen. There's nothing to do with the Windy City.
Does he know he's frozen?
Closed down, so he must know.
Oh, now he must know. Yeah.
So until he comes out, what kind of surgery?
Oh, I just had one of my toes, so I just have a hard sandal now to wear for a week or so.
Uh-huh.
Just
Okay.
had a straight.
Shleima.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's no big deal.
As my computer
my husband's away
crashed.
this week. He's not even home.
Okay, excuse me. David, Rabbi Rosenbaum says my computer crashed. Would you mind telling everyone we will stop for today? Okay, everyone, we will stop for today.
Okay. Do you need any help or anything?
No, I'm fine. I have a daughter who lives around the corner from me.
That's
I'm
right.
fine.
What a
I'm fine.
wonderful thing.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
everyone, bye-bye.